If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. Hey everyone, just want to say, if any of you are dealing with any internal problems, then playing an instrument can be a really good way to feel better. I found this throughout my entire life. I've always played guitar and piano, but whenever I play them, when I'm feeling down or just focus on that, it seems to bring me back to myself more and helps me feel a lot better in myself. So that's just a thought. Anyway, I hope you enjoy these stories and have a great day. I was watching my daughter's kids while she and her husband got out of town. They have a teenage daughter. Let's say her name is Alessa. At like 3 AM, I'm awoken by a weird rustling sound and look out the window and see movement. I saw a boy emerge from the bushes on the side of the house. I saw a bike tossed onto the lawn that wasn't ours. My first thought was that it's a robber checking out houses, but since he looked so young and came through on a bike, I figured scaring him straight would be enough for him to decide whether to go home or not. I didn't want to ruin a teenager's chance of life by calling the cops straight away, so I went out to the porch, flipped the lights on and said, "Hey, can I help you?" The guy appears surprised and nervous, wearing a Letterman-style jacket, but once I got a clear view of him in the streetlights, he seems much older than I thought he was initially. He walked up closer to the house and said, "Yeah, I'm looking for Alessa." I gave him a disapproving glare, hoping he'd realise he came looking for a girl late at night to a grumpy old person. I'm thinking what must have happened is Alessa knew her parents were going out of town and she might have a secret boyfriend or something. It was late and I was alone with several kids, so I don't want him coming any closer to the home. Also, I thought it was weird he comes so late. To be sure Alessa actually wanted to talk to him, I said, "I'm sorry, who?" And he said Alessa, but he messes up the last part of her name. I said, "You wait there." He started to walk up, but I got this sick burning feeling in my gut. Instinct kicked in. I "Oh no, stop, freeze." Then said, "You stay right there. This is private property. You don't come any closer, just wait." So I go in. Alessa is asleep in one room over from where the rustling first occurred. I wake her up and say something to the effect of, "I really don't know what the big deal was to have friends over at this time of night, but you have to tell them to go home." She says she has no clue what I'm talking about. I said there's a guy outside asking for you. Confused, she gets up and goes to the window, sees him and goes white as a ghost. He asks for me? Yeah, by name. Call the police, I've never seen him in my life. I call 911 immediately, but when I'm on the phone to them, Alessa started tugging at my arm saying he's coming up. I had younger kids in the house to think about, so I kept the door latched and pulled it open enough to yell at him saying, "I asked my husband and none of them know you, and I'm calling 911. He got angry and started yelling for her to come out. Thankfully the police come pretty quickly, and when he heard the sirens he bolted out of there. The police followed him but didn't find him. They advised us to take her off all social media where her account wasn't private, and if it is public, make it private. And then buy a heavy duty lock, and she slept in my room for the remainder of her parents being away." When I was 7 or 8, my family went to a beach and rented a room. We had the kind of rooms where you had to rent out both, and they connect through a door. Like, there's the doors to leave the room, and doors to the other room. In the room connected to ours, there's this army family, military dad, some kids and a wife. My older sister was supposed to be watching me, as we were down at the jacuzzi in the evening. As we're playing and hanging out, having a good time, I didn't get out much, was naive and all around a kid. We're both white-skinned, blue eyes, and blonde hair. This mum literally sits in the jacuzzi with us. She starts talking to us and is just making herself comfortable. I was very naive as a kid. Eventually, we start taking books, and she starts talking about her kids. Eventually, we start talking about books, and she starts to talk about her kids, and we're just having a good conversation. Really in depth, I felt. My sister decides she wants to go back to the room, but I don't. I want to stay and talk. So my sister goes back to the room. Now it's just 7-year-old me and some 40-year-old woman. It should have set off alarm bells, but not to me. So she starts talking about going and walking on the beach. It's 10 PM. She wants to go on the beach for a walk and get shells. I thought it was a great idea. I'd get to walk out on the beach at night. I felt so free and like a big kid. I didn't need my sister or anything, so I ran back to the room to tell my grandparents that I'm walking on the beach with Sue, or whatever her name was. I remember my grandmother reading her book, barely listening to me. She just stood off. So I start walking down the creepy motel corridor. So I'm going through the stairwell, which feels like it's out of a movie. Too bad I've never seen it. So I'm walking through the stairwell. The mum's way at the bottom telling me hurry up. While walking through the stairs, Army Dad comes running out saying, "Hey, I learnt about you. Your mum is calling you. It's really important, we gotta go." Basically grabbing me by the wrist, leading me out of the room. He knocks on the door and explains what happened. I never thought much of it until about a year ago. This woman was leading me alone to the beach at night. This army guy had a terrible feeling and intervened. This didn't happen to me, but my father. He joined the Navy somewhere around 80 and 84. He's told me many stories over the years, but this one sticks out in my mind the most as it's his first time at sea on a submarine. He recently got promoted and opted to become a submariner because of the exclusivity of the position. Less crew, usually only room for 1 or 2 people in your Pacific trade. Basically, you have to do the best to get on the sub. Anyway, he's on his first night out on the submarine. Everyone's asleep on their bunks. If you haven't seen them, they're usually stacked 3 high and in line on the side of the hull in a hallway formation. My dad got in one and it's at the very back. However, he wakes up at 2 AM to alarms and lights going off. Everyone's rushing out of their bunks and out to the hatch into the next section. My dad being the last one to wake up, last out of the bunks. Ended up to the latch too late. It closed, sealed, and locked in front of him with someone shouting on the other side, "Mike, find the leak." Apparently, a leak sprung somewhere around the bunks. It either had to be fixed or that section of the submarine would have to stay sealed in order to prevent the rest of the submarine sinking, and hence him drowning. Eventually he found it, sealed it, and the hatch was opened. He has lots of other stories, but this one scared him the most. I'm an 18-year-old female student, and from where I'm from, July is an exam period, so I have to drag my backpack around during that time. Anyway, it's 7 AM, and my exam wasn't going to start until 9, so I decide to call Uber and get there early because I live at least 1 hour away from the exam centre. The car arrives on time, and I go in. Now, I'm not the kind of person to judge someone with at a first glance, but for some reason, the driver made me feel really uneasy. He was in his mid-40s, had dark circles around his eyes, and was smirking a lot. He was silent for a good 10 minutes, but he starts asking questions. He says if I'm a student, and I don't want to answer, thinking that he'll try to hit on me, so I just lie and say that I'm a proctor, hoping he would back off, and God was I wrong. He starts to smirk and tell me he would always cheat on his exams, and that I was a mean person in a joking way for ruining people's lives. I don't know why I did this, but I chuckled at this comment, and it triggered him to thinking that I liked him. My bad. He then started to get personal, asking me how old I was, and if I would let my kid cheat. I lied and said I was 34, and that I have a 16-year-old kid. I was hoping this would drive him off, since I was old and had a kid, but he got creepier. He then told me I looked like a strict parent, and started saying weird stuff. He then said to me if my husband was strict like that, and started saying, "Oh, is he in your life or not?" And even thinking I have a husband, he still doesn't shut up. Now, I noticed he's moved to a completely different region from where I should be able to take my exam, going in literally the wrong direction. I start to panic, but was afraid he would do something if I confronted him, since we're in the middle of a rural area. So I decide to fake a phone call from my co-worker, pretending to talk to her, and tell her that I'm in an Uber and I'll be there soon. And I'm kidding you not, he literally immediately turns a car around, going to the direction we came from. He continued making horrible comments, and I swear this turns my blood cold. As we approached the centre, he told me that I should catch someone cheating, come back with him, let him drive them so he can make extra money, and after that he would take me to my address. The creepy part is that he had studied it by heart. Legit corpse, number, he was looking me into the eyes, said, "I know where you live." I still remember the mark he drove, a blue Nissan. If I ever Uber again and get stuck with a blue Nissan, I will cancel it no matter what. I didn't call the company because I'm afraid he knows my address. I just hate that this happened. My family loves travelling, like all the time, so about a year ago, my family took a trip to France. At this time, I'm a 9th grader and in high school. Before the trip, my mum spent a few months learning French. My sisters have some basic knowledge of the language, so we're set. So we flew into some country in Europe, I forget which, and took the train all the way to Paris. Once we arrived in the train station, we took a few minutes to prepare ourselves before heading out and looking for a taxi. We were walking when suddenly, a guy comes up to us. He knew some English, and said, "Are we looking for a taxi?" Since he had a large van taxi, my family was happy since family, and there isn't enough seats in normal taxis, so we agreed. We walk over to him, and he points out to a large black van, with another guy sitting in the driver's seat. Now, I know thinking of it, there is no reason for 2 taxi drivers to be in a car. The weird part was that it had no taxi indicators, or anything showing what it actually was. I remember my parents exchanging glances at each other, but going along with it. At this point, we haven't even discussed prices or anything, even where we're heading. He just opened the rather large trunk, and started chucking our bags inside there. At this point, my mum was worried. She demanded an answer on why there were no taxi indicators. The man started switching English and French and wasn't given a clear answer. She didn't push it, My mum asked for a price. It was a bit costly, but there's no other regular vans around. At this point, the man's getting to our lack of language and noticed my dad's attitude change. He seems more concerned. He went up to the man, stopped him at putting the last piece of luggage into the van and said, "Show me your taxi license." At this time, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a taxi license, and I guess he didn't either. His eyes widened and he seems nervous. In broken English he says, right, taxi license, and pretended to pack his pocket and act like he left it at home. My parents at this point grabbed our luggage, said thank you, we don't need one now, and quickly took us across the street where we merged with a large group of people. We see the van suddenly speed off. We eventually found a taxi terminal and a large van. We never spoke of the event again. But I know we were so close to being kidnapped, it horrifies me. My husband and I love to go driving. We prefer road trips, but on the weekends or nights, we have nothing better to do than to go around cruising and just drive around. We prefer smooth and not busy roads. On this particular night, we are bored and decide to go cruising. We went up north to a small town, about half an hour from the city where the roads are curvy and smooth. This town is close to the mountains, and if you follow this particular path to the main street all the way up north, it starts driving up a mountain. It's about 9 PM, and there are very few cars in the road already since it's a little cute town. But we kept going north anyway from the houses and stores, and eventually to where the roads start curving uphill. We drive up for about 15 minutes more, and it's pitch black when we see some blinking lights. As we get closer, we see a truck that's on the side of the road facing us. I'm getting the chills thinking about being all the way up there in the middle of nowhere, and a stranded truck on the side of the road appears. As we slowly approach, I tell my husband it's probably best to turn back. I have a bad feeling, but at this point, we're pretty much at the truck. He pulls up next to us. We see that there's a young blonde guy, probably in his late 20s, who gets up to our window. I get such a bad vibe by this and tell my husband not to put his window down. I think he also gets a weird vibe and actually listens to me. He kinda just loudly asks what's wrong, and the guy just says something happened to his truck and he needs a hand. His phone is dead. Now my husband asks what happened, but this guy insists on showing him and to take a look. He says it's very friendly and even calls him bro, and he's glad we pulled up. My husband says, you know what, I won't be much help because I know nothing about cars, but I can call help for you. My friend knows a lot about cars. The guy's insisting and gets upset. I'm now looking back at the truck, and I thought I caught movement inside the truck. I tell my husband I think we should go. Now, he probably saw the look of fear on my face because he puts the car in reverse, but as he did, the guy is now behind our car, so my husband decides to go forward instead. We drive up for maybe 2 minutes, trying to find a place to turn around since the road is so narrow. The road turns to a dirt road, and there's a little more space on the side, so he's able to turn the car around. I am dreading going back that way now, and our phones have no signal at all. In my mind, I know this could all be someone with genuine problems, but this doesn't make sense. I cannot help the feeling in my gut. We soon reach the area where the truck had been, and there's no truck at all. We drive maybe another 5 minutes, no trace of one whatsoever, and we're sure we've passed the place that he said. We didn't drive up too far to begin with. I am both relieved and terrified that the truck's no longer there though. If it had really broke down, how did it get help working again in such a short amount of time? Calming myself down, I'm telling my husband, hey, maybe they really did get it to work. Maybe it turned on all of a sudden and they drove off. Suspicious, yeah, but not impossible. As we keep driving through, the roads begin to straighten out. We notice far off the truck with all the lights off and park to the side again and notice movement in the truck. I say out loud, why did they turn out all the lights? I think they were thinking we're still far enough away from them, but we see two figures get on the other side of the truck and crouch down as if hiding. We get closer and my husband floors it. As we drive past, the two men get up. One of them is the guy that we had spoken to earlier, and the other's massive. With a very surprised look in their faces, one of them turns and runs behind us trying to catch us. I kept looking back, but it's so dark. Now all of a sudden, I see the headlights in their truck, and they start driving in our direction very fast. My husband keeps going, and eventually, we lose the headlights. I kept looking back the rest of the way, so scared that they're somehow still following us. Maybe they turned off their lights again and I can't see them. Anyway, after driving for a very long time back to the city, we're convinced no one's following us now. We do call the non-emergency line given a description, but we don't get the plates, so it's pretty much futile doing so, just given a description of the guys we saw. I realise all this could be rationalised, but it makes no sense why one guy was hiding and how they tried desperately to follow us. I hate the fact that they're still out there. I just pray we never encounter them again. I don't know if this is an Eastern Coast thing, but in my little town, there's a twice the ice station. Basically, you fill up water jugs and get ice bags for cheaper than you can in the grocery store. I went out a few nights ago to get some water, because hey, who wants to be drinking tap water? My husband was home, and because I'm kind of heavily pregnant, he insisted that he go instead, but I really wish that he would have done. I was out at 1 AM, and it's dark for miles in the middle of nowhere. As I get out of my car, I open the back seat to get the gallon jugs and close the door. The moment I do, a dark blue truck van pulls up behind me. I presume that they're doing the same thing as me, and I don't really think too much of it. However, alarm bells start going off, and the alarm bells start screaming at me when the slide door opens up and two large men step out. It's about a 20-foot distance between me and them, so the first thing I do is pull out my phone and start making a pretend phone call saying, "Yeah, I'm almost home." As soon as they see me answer, one guy says crap, and they both get in there, tires literally screeching as they bolt out of there. I throw the jugs into my car, empty, and lock all the doors a million times before I broke down calling my husband. He told me to write down the make and model of the car and colour, and we'd go to the police station first thing tomorrow. Now I don't know if they targeted me because I was a woman alone in the middle of nowhere, but deep down, I know they targeted me because I was pregnant, and I don't want to think what would have happened if they got me. When I was 16, some friends and I went to an outdoor centre concert thing. We parked to the mall and took a shuttle to the venue. For perspective, the mall is a 20-minute drive from our home, and the venue's another 20 minutes away in a different direction. During the concert, I end up losing my friends in the crowd. I don't care though, as I wanted to get to the front, and I could just call them after the concert ends. Well, of course I lost my phone somewhere in the crowd of people and don't even notice until the last show wraps up. I search the ground as the people dissipate with no luck. Reluctantly, I just hop on the bus heading back to the mall, hoping to meet them at the car. The car is gone and I start to freak out a little, but it's 10 PM when I head to the bus station to see when the next bus is coming. Just my luck, it's a special holiday, so no buses until 10 AM. I borrow a stranger's phone and call the two numbers I know, my mum and brother. My mum doesn't answer, but my brother does. He basically gives me the suck it up talk and hangs up. So I'm alone, scared, and a little drunk in a city I don't know. I try walking but quickly give up when I realise I'm basically walking down a random highway towards God knows where. Back at the station, I'm just staring at the map when a stranger creeps up behind me. He asks me where I'm heading and I say the truth. He is conveniently going to the same city, asking if I take a split to a cab. Realising this is my only option, as I said I don't have my own money, we get in the car. Turns out he has less than I do. We barely have enough to get to the heart of the city, which is a 10-minute drive from my home, but at least I know my way from there. During the drive, this guy gets progressively more creepy. He's aware that I'm 16 and he's 25. He scoots closer every minute, touching me, insisting I come back with him, even writing his number on my leg. As we get there, I realise the situation I'm in. We're about to get out at a quiet area at 2 AM and the cabbie's going to drive off, leaving no one to hear me scream. The second he gets out, I turn to the driver begging him to take me further, so I can at least put some distance between us. The cab driver said he hadn't heard a word the whole way, but definitely heard something odd. He asked me for my address and takes me all the way home, and the creeper stares in frustration as he drives off. When I got home, I offered to wake up my mum to pay him, but he declined, saying he's just glad I'm safe. I broke him through the kitchen window to get to bed and cried myself to sleep. I'm just glad the cab driver was so kind to me. I really enjoy going camping. I'm truly an outdoorsy kind of person. It's very rare that I ever have a bad experience while camping, but I did have one that stood out to me, and is one that I can't explain. So let me start off by saying this was a good few years ago, and everything seemed normal on the day. In fact, I was having a really good day, so I arrived for my 4-day planned hike and camp in the evening. I had a really easy to set up tent, so it didn't really matter what time I got there. No, I wanted to sleep on the first day because I was tired from driving. So I park my car up and I realise I'm the only person in the parking area. I get out and hear some voices, but they immediately stop when I get outside. I look and realise that I've accidentally left the radio on, so I just turn it off, get my camping gear out and head out. Now everything feels normal. The sun's setting, so I can still see where I'm going, and honestly, the forest and area that I'm in looks truly beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, it's probably the nicest sunset I've ever seen. There was sort of a mist above the trees. I took a couple photos on my phone and I was really glad I did. I actually still use one as a screensaver, but that's not the point. I find this beautiful spot that I've been to before. It's close to a lake. I set up my camp and equipment, and what's better to do than some night fishing? So I head off towards that. I have an inflatable raft that I can use for my fishing. I have a small Bluetooth speaker with me, and set that down and set off. I'm having a brilliant time. Unfortunately, I haven't caught anything. But I do have this strange feeling washing over me. It's almost like a paranoia that I can't quite describe. Now, the forests and wilderness can be a beautiful area during the day, but at night, even for an avid camper like me, it can be pretty scary. I stay still for a second, and I'm sure I can hear the same kind of voices from before. That's odd. I turn off my speaker so I can concentrate more. I know it's definitely not from what I was listening to previously, but I put my mind on fishing. I want to catch some dinner. Now as I'm fishing, I hear this strange thumping sound like someone slamming something on a tree. It's odd, it's almost like someone's taken a metal hammer to an old oak tree and is smashing it. It's in a very rhythmic manner though, stopping for a few seconds and starting again. Now, needless to say, this confuses the hell out of me, and I begin to hear more voices. I can't tell exactly what they're saying, but I decide that, you know what, I think it's better to be out in my camping site at least. That's where I have my weapons if I really need it, that I've buried now under some leaves. The thought flashed across my mind that, oh god, imagine if they found my site and my weapons, then I'd really be screwed, and I laughed to myself. So I start paddling back. As I do, I've realised that the sound has now stopped, but also that it's coming from the opposite side of the lake. I have a horrible feeling about this. I don't know of any other campers in the area, but hey, it's not the first time I've encountered anyone out there, and I make it back to the shore. As I do so, I get my stuff together, leave my raft deflated on the side, knowing I can come back for it in the morning, and I head out. As I do, the thumping starts again. This time it's louder and closer than it was before. Okay, that's really odd, and I've now picked up the pace. I'm thinking about calling out, but I realise it's not a good idea in case these are actually bad people. I glance behind me for a second, and I can just about make out the flash of a light before it cuts off the second I turn my head. Now, I don't need any more signs, and I literally start sprinting back to my campsite. As I do, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched and followed. The thudding sound slowly stops as I'm jogging, but I'm not going to wait around for it. I quickly pack up all my stuff. I decide I'm going to sleep in my car just until I figure out what's going on the next morning. I look and thankfully find my gun, exactly where I left it. I feel a lot more safe now. I start sprinting towards my car, and as I do, I can hear rustling around me. I'm now terrified. I call out, whoever's there, I have a gun and I'm not afraid to use it. What's wild is this doesn't even deter them. I start to think maybe it's a group of animals stalking me like coyotes or something, the last thing I need. As I'm running, I can see the figure of a person near my car. I shine my torch and I can see the reflection of animal eyes. I don't really get a lot of time to figure out exactly what animal it is, but it gives me some relief knowing it's not a person. As I get closer, there's this disgusting smell. Just as I reach for the door, I can see that this isn't actually an animal. It's just an animal's head that's been freshly cut on the roof of my car. What the hell? I now let out a really loud scream that I don't even have to think about making. I quickly get in my car and turn on the lights. I can see the silhouette of a person in front of me now, who quickly ducks down. I instantly slam it into reverse, but I've realised I'm having a really bad panic attack, and I need to wait at least 3 seconds or so before I start driving, before it gets any worse. Just as I'm doing so, I can see the flashes of more torches behind me. I instantly snap out of it and immediately step on the accelerator and speed the hell out of there. I then instantly call the police to report what's happened. I can't believe that this actually happened to me. How could a nice relaxing getaway turn into this? How the hell did that animal head get there? Who are them people? The police agreed to meet me further up the road, and I agreed to help go back to figure out exactly what's happened. I'm literally shaking, but I feel a lot safer with the police officer there. He says he's never heard of anything like it before happening. When we get there, there's no longer a feeling of being watched. Disgustingly enough, the animal head's still on the floor, close to the exit where it rolled off my car. The officer says that someone must have done this very recently because of the way it sat and the blood around it. He does a quick patrol and can't find anything in the area. I go to the lake and show him exactly where I saw the first torch. I'm now able to retrieve my raft too, but there's no signs of anyone out there. He says he's literally never seen anything like this before, and that whoever done this is long gone, and I agreed to go back to the station with him to make a bigger report. Turns out, there's lots of reports of occultist activity in the area that neither me or the officer knew about previously. Apparently they make regular animal sacrifices, and worse, they attempt to kidnap people, and have done so before. Unfortunately for me, they never found exactly who did this, and I still have more questions than answers, and I never went back to that same area again. We live in Oregon, and we drove down to the coast of Northern California. We had a late start leaving our houses, and arrived at a little beach south of the Redwoods just after 9 PM. It's pouring rain and dark out, so we park on a dirt road that had access to the beach, and decided against walking down on the sand to set up my camp. My friend drives an old Toyota pickup with a camper shell cover in the bed, which has a mattress in the back, so we decide just to sleep on here. The beach area where we were is very secluded, and belonging to a local Native American tribe. They didn't mind us visiting, as long as we're respectful. After talking for a while in the shelter of the truck canopy, my friend fell asleep before drifting off myself. I realised I had forgotten the passenger lock of the truck. All of our valuables were stored in the cab, so I hoped nobody would come along to rob us in our sleep. After a few dreamless hours, I heard the sound of the driver's side door handle of my friend's truck being lifted. That door happened to be locked, but I was awake, terrified that whoever had tried to open the door would now go around to unlock the side, or try to get in bed where we are. It was still dark out at this time, but I heard footsteps starting to walk around to the back. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it through the back window of the camper shell, in hopes of alerting the intruder that there's people here. I heard footsteps get a little further away. Then I heard the sounds of snapping twigs and something heavy being thrown. Then the man let out a long yell, screaming a swear word at the top of his lungs. It didn't take more than 2 or 3 yells before I woke up my friend. "Dude, there's a crazy guy outside. He tried getting in the truck, now he's walking around yelling," I blurt out as I shook his shoulder. We sat upright peering out of the windows, but it's still pitch black out. I check my phone and it's 5 AM. The sound of the man walking around the woods near the truck don't let up. He's still screaming now, and it seems to be getting louder. He would occasionally yell further away, but then appear closer. We sat huddled in fear for a good hour, unsure of what to do. His shout sounded as though he was full of rage, but he never attempted to get into the truck again. Eventually, The owners of the only other car parked there come to their vehicle and drove off as the sky started to lighten. We did not hear any more yelling or log frying after that, and eventually we're both able to sleep for a bit, waking up at around 10 AM. It's hard to believe that during that terrifying hour we heard what we did, and it was so vivid. We still had no idea what the man was doing or why he was so angry, but the guy screaming profanities still remains a mystery to me. Last summer, a good friend and I embarked on a backpacking trip through the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. As fairly experienced day hikers, we felt comfortable in the Whites with our inaugural overnight trip. While planning, my buddy Ellis figured we could hike to a backcountry campsite to make our first wilderness night a little more fun. I wasn't going to disagree. Beautiful views, historic trails, and protected night in the Dry River wilderness. I was stoked, to say the least. Before any hiking trip I do, a little internet search on the trails or shelters I'll be coming across. Throughout the mid-1900s, there were a series of these lean-to ups, and down the Dry River wilderness meant for backpackers or through hikers really looking to escape the crowds in more populated areas of the forest. Though as time went on, the Forest Service had other more pressing matters. Many of these shelters were dismantled, except Dry River Shelter 3, the last remaining shelter in the wilderness. On the morning of our hike, I met Ellis at the trail at the head and we set off. The sky was overcast, bringing with it a dense fog through the trees. The weather left us with nearly no visibility, so there went our stunning views. At least the trail consisted of prime, technical New England rock, scrambling alongside the river. Ellis and I made it up the Presidential Ridge, stopping by the lakes of clouds. The hut was filled with day hikers, backpackers, and through hikers all socializing together. We were even more rewarded with some sun and a brief glimpse of the Dry River Valley on the summit of Mount Monroe, before the fog rolled back in. With dwindling views and a stiff wind, Ellis and I hustled below tree line, down to the river Shelter 3, our home for the night. Once we dropped off the ridge into the valley, we entered the wilderness zone where the rangers patrolled sparingly. Time to really be alone in the wild. As we trek into the wilderness, all signs of civilization disappeared and the trail was densely overgrown. Although it had been raining all week, there were no footprints in the mud either. At least we'd have some relaxing isolation, I guess. After about an hour or so of descending, Ellis spotted the lean-to just as our legs were asking for relief. I look up and there's this gorgeous old timber structure with a well-used fire pit alongside a cold mountain river. Pristine camping. As we settled in and explored the site, I found a small, bound notebook nestled into the corner of the structure. On the cover someone wrote, Dry River Shelter number 3. Out of curiosity, I opened it, but found nothing more than a lone man's name scribbled onto the first page and a date. Just your standard log camping log. Oddly though, the man signed the book the previous day. We saw no footprints or signs of human life or animal disturbances on the trail here at the shelter. Rain can wash away tracks, but not all signs of animal life. Something felt off to me. I showed it to Ellis, who found it curious but nothing more than the sign of a single man. He convinced me that he's probably a hiking veteran and a professional at LNT. I bought into Ellis's thoughts on the situation and my mind eases now. At the sunset, We started a roaring fire alongside the riverbank. Ellis commented on how quiet the location was, having not seen another soul beyond the chirp of birds since leaving Crawford Path. The silence is eerie, but we figure that it's just civilization that's desensitized us to the world that we're actually in now. The sun was setting, and we grew tired with darkness. Ellis took the lean-to, and I spent the night in my tent. Sleep came quickly after hiking 8 miles with 20 pounds on my back, but it doesn't last long. A brutally sharp snapping noise awoke in me. The only thing I could compare it to would be a 2x4 smashing into a tree. I think, oh god, a bear's come to search our food, and that's 50 yards away. But nothing out of the ordinary for New Hampshire. Sleep took over once again, and I remembered waking up to the sun rising over the peaks. How can you sleep with a bear there? I stumbled out of my tent to see Ellis also waking up slowly. As we made our morning oats and coffee, I wander around the site again to see if I can find the marks a bear's left. Instead, I noticed something odd. The small notebook is open. I swear I put it back where I found it. Closed and in the back corner of the shelter, not open on the floor. Hey, Ellis. Were you checking out this camp log last night? Nah, I passed out, man. It's not like there's anything to read anyway. He responded. You sure? I commented as I bend over to pick it up. The lone hiker's name was not so lonely now. At least 20 more names have filled the pages. The lone traveller, whose name was originally on the first page, could now be found several pages deep into the notebook. I tossed it to Ellis, whose face instantly dropped when he sees all of the names on it. Great. Now I know it's not just dehydration or delusion from the previous day. Dude, we must have seen that thing last night. There's no freaking way we missed all these names. How could we? This is when I began to tell Ellis about the snapping noise during the night. I received nothing other than instant denial. These sounds were not the results of some hooligans or backward crazies following us. Ellis was convinced. It wasn't a bear either. Ellis led us out of the site and we instantly made our way back. A year has passed since then, and I'm still not quite sure what happened on our night at the Dry River Shelter 3. The memory of seeing a single name written on the front page is so clear in my mind now, I could not have mistaken it in. Could I have made the noises? Obviously not. I was asleep and they're further away. Ellis was asleep too. I would have seen him. I don't like to think it was paranormal, but it really begs the question. All logical explanations have went out the window. And of course a bear didn't write in there. It just terrifies me thinking of it now. I'm a 17-year-old high school guy with a weak body. I live in a small town in the Philadelphians, and this town is surrounded by rice fields, with a highway going straight across it. Part of my usual weekend routine is to go jogging early in the morning. This is at some time around 5 AM. My usual jogging route is from my house, somewhere in the middle of town, to a small hill with a wonderful view of town in the morning. To reach my destination, I would have to jog on the side of the highway. From time to time, fog would appear on the highway, and once you're inside, you can only see 10 or 15 feet before it all goes white. So one Saturday, I decide to jog. I invite one of my friends, the same age as me, to join me, since he follows the same route anyway. We left home at 5 AM, proceed to the highway. As usual, a thick fog blanketed the highway. The cars that would pass by had their lights on, and there were several one-ways because of road repairs. As we enter the fog, we decide to jog along the side of the road, past a couple of roadworks, about 100 meters along each. Now all's well at this point. We're a bit exhausted, but otherwise fine. We barely encountered anyone else, and usually they're just fellow joggers. Then we come across another roadwork, and we saw this guy crouched down on the asphalt. He was wearing a dirty orange vest, and he had a similarly dirty hard hat on. We can't really see his face, but decide just to ignore it. He looks as though he's fidgeting with something in his hands, so we thought he was just holding a few tools or something. Also, there was no one there but us, me, my friend and that guy. The fog's thick as hell. My friend signalled to me to keep a distance from the guy and I followed him. When we get closer, we can hear him humming a strange tune under his breath, which in of itself isn't that weird, but boy, we were wrong. As we get closer, he starts acting erratically. He stopped for a moment as I passed him, then starts laughing. It wasn't a regular laugh, it sounded sinister and a little dry. It was really loud, so it began to freak me out. We didn't increase our speed at this point, as we think he's messing with us. But he doesn't stop. He just kept laughing and laughing, and we knew it was beyond a prank. I can't describe his laugh more than I just didn't trust it. We didn't look back. We were speeding up now, as we were starting to see the hill. I was gasping for air, but somehow I didn't let that stop me. I forced myself on, and my friend was doing the same. He was probably 50 meters behind us when I looked at him. He had stopped laughing, but now he was standing straight and staring at us. He called out to us in my language in an arranged tone. That's when adrenaline kicked in. I just ran and ran until we reached the hill. In hindsight, I don't know how I was able to push myself for so long. When we finally arrive at the top, we're exhausted and nearly collapse on a cement bench and stay there for over an hour. Like a breath of fresh air, my friend laughs in a comedic manner. We then walk towards home. I haven't ate yet, I was so hungry, and as we passed the road we saw the guy in. He's no longer there. The only people there are wearing construction outfits that are working on the traffic signals, but nowhere near the man. As I got home, I told my parents about it and they said it's probably a nut job looking for someone to rob, who's probably stole the outfit, and I never went jogging again in the fog after that. This happened a few years ago when I was mountain walking. We started as a large group, but after some time of everyone choosing their own pace, I ended up walking alone. I was walking downhill through a thick forest area when I slipped on an unsteppable part of the trail, falling fully. It hurt quite a lot. Before I could get up, I see a deer walking out of the trees to my left, standing in front of me. This is not natural, because deers usually avoid human contact. Something was really off about this deer. I didn't know what. Its eyes appeared lifeless, filled with uneasiness. Then it opened its mouth to show multiple rows of what appeared to be razor-sharp teeth, and let out an ear-shattering scream. It sounded like nothing I ever heard before. It shouldn't exist. I watch quite a lot of horror movies, and yet none have come close to the scream of this. It was so demonic. After that scream, it closed its jaws and walked away to the side of the woods. Now I've never told this story to anyone else before, but I'm sure what I saw was a Wendigo. It just horrifies me knowing that I saw this thing. For a second when it happened I thought maybe I've hit my head, but I had no head injuries whatsoever and I knew exactly how I landed. It almost put me off running in the woods entirely. When I was young, I worked as a backpacking guide in Western NC. My schedule dictated a full 8-day shift with 6 days off. During those 6 days to myself, my other co-workers and me would play in the woods. In the summer, you can't beat a mountain swimming hole. One of our favourite activities was called Paradise Falls, alternatively called Wolf Creek Falls. This is a cliff jumping spot with a huge swimming area, a tiny slot canyon and an inner pool. Most will venture just to do the small jump, even though it's the smallest and arguably least accessible. Even though the jump is almost 9 foot at most, you must do 10 minutes rock scaling to get there. We are all adventuring in and out from inside this tiny canyon, and you can't see the main pool. Well, we got to the jump and coaxed the first person off, a fellow guide who had never been to the spot before. She jumped successfully and swam into the main pool and beach area. Then she screamed. Because she was now out of sight, myself and another guide jumped in together and swam the short distance to her, with the others in tow. Of course we figured she was injured somehow. She was treading water and just staring wide-eyed at the riverbank. When I looked to the shore, there stood a man. He's massive, easily 6'7", and appears to have no hair on him, wearing beat-up overalls. Perhaps the most disturbing is that he had folds of skin all over his body. Imagine the Michelin Man, but this is on his face, arms and chest, everywhere with these weird layers. He's also armed with a shotgun, staring intently at us. He just stood there and watched as we grab anything important and speed out of there. He walked slowly back into the forest and we never saw him again. Around 8 to 10 years ago, I was at a lake way out in the woods on some land that my dad owned. I was alone aside from my dog, a terrier. I had only been fishing on the little pier in the southeast corner for about 10 minutes when I get an almost overwhelming feeling of being in danger, and then notice something or someone watching me from the tree line on the opposite side of the lake. I was a kid, but somehow keep composure. For some reason, I felt it important that whatever it was did not know I was aware of them. Anyway, it started moving slowly from tree to tree, near taking its eye off me, but never truly facing away from me. The lake's about 70 yards wide, so I can't really see details, but I know where they're facing. After realizing that it was following me, I pull my pole down and walk down the pier and up the bank towards the trail back of our cabin, which is about 1/4 of a mile away. Once I hit the tree line, I bolted to the cabin and waited there with one of my dad's guns until my parents got home. The only witness I had was my dog, and he saw it as well. I know because when he saw the figure, he instantly starts growling in a low tone until I make him stop. I have no idea who or what it could have been or what the intentions are, but they're most certainly not good. This took place in southeast Mississippi near the Alabama border back in the 90s. We didn't live there, but we spent most weekends up there. I know it couldn't have been a normal person, because our nearest neighbour was a very old couple who literally lived miles away. Aside from the lake area that our cabin's on, the surroundings very thick forest. The figure was extremely tall as well. I have a very good memory, especially for details. Also, shortly before I noticed it, I got a very strong feeling that I was being watched. I never felt safe there again, and I was so glad my dad sold it. This incident happened to me when I was younger, probably around 19 or 20. I used to drive around the countryside in the woods for hours on end, up to literally 6 hours, smoke cigarettes while I listened to music daydreaming. I've been through a lot, so this is a nice way for me to let off steam and digest all the badness that happened to me in the past few years. There is a route that goes into the southern part of my state and eventually takes you to Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. If you keep going all the way, it will eventually take you to Florida. It was a road I found to be very fond as it intersected with a lot of interesting places. It could take you to cities and beaches alike, all the while somehow remaining isolated and rural. On one of those day trips, I was driving through a heavily wooded area that opens up into a field lined with trees on my left. I was pretty zoned out at this point, but something on the side of the road immediately caught my attention. In fact, it even seemed that time slowed, or I could see this apparition more vividly than any other thing I've ever seen in my life. What I saw was an older, balding man dressed in a full Catholic priest garb. His mouth is open, appearing to be in grief, screaming at the sky. He was standing in front of a dead deer, a buck. From what I recall, it was around 3 points, maybe 4. Behind the deer was a 1970s Crown Vic style police car with its lights on. It had no markings on it whatsoever to signify what country it's from. And no one's in the vehicle. I don't even think it had an engine running sound. It appeared as though the vehicle had been parked there all day. The other odd thing about this vehicle is that it has no damage on the front end to show that it's responsible for hitting the deer, nor was there any blood or anything. The deer seems fine. Taking a step back, trying to think of what I saw, it had the appearance of being staged or set up somehow, as if it was a prop for a movie. Everything was just so odd. For the speed I was travelling at, the glance I cast on this spectacle was only 4 seconds, but it so abruptly singed into my mind now. I have never seen anything like it. For some reason I started crying after seeing it. Did the forces that shape time or something just merge and I saw something from back then? I don't know, I've even been on the same spot from this trip, and there's never a trace of it, not even the body of the deer or tyre tracks from the police car that could be seen. Like a breeze, it was gone. A thing so out of place it could not have been from its surroundings. I have no answers to any of these questions. Only a lack of closure for something that's scarring my brain.